So the way we're going to do that is by using the get image size function. I think I've spelled that right, it looks okay. And this function takes one parameter, which is the location or the name of the image that you want to get information for. So this is just path, except path, not how you'd say that. Okay, and we're going to store this information in a variable called info, like so. So for the sake of testing, let's just print this out, and then we'll go on and call this function. So let's just do print info, and then let's go to our page, which is where we're going to be working for most of the time, and let's just call create thumbnail, and we'll pass in the higher image first, which I think was called tall. I can't actually remember, so I'll have to check that in a moment. And for the second parameter, we'll just leave it blank for now, and let's just do 100 and 100 for the width and height. At the moment, these other parameters aren't used, so it doesn't really matter what we use. So let's go to our browser, and let's open up the crate. It was tall. And as you can see, I've forgotten to include the file, so that was pretty pro of me. So let's just do that. So typically, like I said, this would be like an example of a page, or I don't know, a register script or something like that. So you would obviously be including this backend file somewhere in there. It's just that I forgot because I'm silly. What was it called? Image. Okay, let's try again, and hopefully it'll work. Okay, good. So you can see this is the information that we've got on the image. We've got its, well, it doesn't actually tell you what these are, but it's the width and height. This is, I've forgotten, it's the number of bits, I think, so it's to do with the colour, but you can check that if you want. This is a string that you could use in the image tag. Bits is the number of bits of colour. I don't know what parameter 2 is. And MIME is the important one. That's the type of image. And you need to know that so you can load it into the GD or GUD library. So that's why we're calling this function here. So let's go back to our script and carry on. Now we know what information we've got. So for the sake of convenience, I'm going to define another variable here called size. And this is going to be equal to the image size. So because we're dealing with a lot of sizes and widths and heights and stuff all over the place within this function, we're going to be using arrays to represent sort of a vector, an x and y coordinate. So we'll define a new array, and we'll put the width into parameter 1 and the height into parameter 2. So we'll just say info 0 here and info 1. So now we've got size, so we can use size 0, and we'll know that's always the width and always the height. And we'll be using some similar arrays a bit later on. So now we've decided, well, now we've got that information, we can create the actual image resource, which we'll then be able to manipulate to create our thumbnail. So we need to do something different for each of the supported types. So we'll just create a simple if statement to check the MIME type, which was stored in this variable, if you remember from the output a moment ago. So if that is equal to image PNG, we'll do something, and if it's otherwise, if it's equal to the other ones, we'll do something different. So image JPEG, otherwise the other one is image GIF. So info MIME is equal to image GIF. Okay, there we go. And if it's none of those, as in the else condition, that means that this format is not supported, so we'll just return false. Like so. So inside each of these, we're going to be creating a variable called source, or src for short, which is going to be equal to one of the image create from functions. So these functions take one parameter, which is the file name, and they create a image resource, which then we can then use to do various things with, manipulate the image. So image create from, and then it's the type. So in this case, PNG, and it just takes the path like so. So what we can actually do is just copy this down into the other sections to avoid typos on the from, and then just change the name. So in the image JPEG section, it should be from JPEG, and in the GIF section, it should be from GIF, without the D. Okay, there we go. So then down here, we know that we've got a image source that we can use to, well, create our thumbnail. So now that we know we're okay, we can create a new image of the size that we want, to output in the end, and we're going to copy our source image onto that image. So that's the whole process. So let's create a new variable called thumb, short for thumbnail, fairly obviously, like so. And this is going to be equal to image create true color, the American spelling of color. That often trips me up, but never mind. This takes two parameters, one being the width and one being the height. The reason we have to do this, by the way, is that there is no way to directly resize an image. Image resources, by definition, have a size, and you can't change that size. So what we need to do is create a new image that's the size we want, and copy the original one onto it. So that's what we're doing. So next thing we're going to do is define two aspect ratios, because we need to check, we need to check a few conditions. So say if the image is wider, say if the image is wider than the thumbnail, we're going to treat it slightly differently. And I think the best way to demonstrate this would be via images, because that's sort of what we're doing. So let's just have a look at the two types of image we could have here. Oh, I was meant to hide those blue squares, but never mind. So say if the image is higher than the thumbnail we want, this is the situation we've got here. So what we're going to be doing is essentially cropping out the blue boxed area and resizing that to our thumbnail size. So hopefully that makes sense. It does in my head. So as you can see, there is a difference between the two aspect ratios, the two types. So we need to check to see if we're dealing with this case or if we're dealing with this case, because for the taller one we want to crop off the top, and for the wider one we want to crop off the sides. So to do that, we're going to define two variables, one for the aspect ratio of the source, i.e. the actual image we're dealing with, so this butterfly here, and one for the actual thumbnail that we're trying to create, which would be the blue square in this case. Okay, so let's just go back to our code and we'll do that. So just down here, after we've created the thumbnail, we'll define another variable called source aspect without the v, and this is going to be equal to the size 0 divided by the size 1, which is the width divided by the height. Then we're going to do the exact same thing for the thumbnail, so we'll call it thumb aspect. This is going to be equal to simply width over height, like so. And these are just the two parameters from up here. So once we've done that, we can use a simple if statement to check if we're dealing with, which of these cases we've got. So if it's taller, if it's wider, or if it's the same size as the third one. So we can do that very simply now that we know the aspect ratios by doing if source aspect is less than thumb aspect, except spelled right, I think. That means that it's narrower. So let's just add a comment so we know what we're doing. And by narrower I mean the thumbnail is narrower. No, wait, sorry, the image is narrower, so we want to crop off the top and bottom. Otherwise, if the source aspect is greater than the thumb aspect, that means that the source is wider, so wider, otherwise same shape. Okay, so with that done, what we need to do now is decide on what's going to happen for each of these cases. And since I've just got to the 10-minute mark, I think we'll leave that for part 2. So thank you for watching and come back for part 2.